One of the biggest skill gaps in XDefiant is its movement, and that's why I've created the most complete movement guide on YouTube, covering everything from the basics all the way up to the advanced. Whether you're new to the game or someone just looking to get better, this is the video for you. We'll also be covering movement speed versus mobility, so stick around not to miss a thing. So starting off with your settings, let's discuss auto sprint versus regular sprint. For the most part, this is personal preference, but there also is a few movement mechanics that can only be performed with auto sprint on. If you do decide to use auto sprint, I do recommend using it at a threshold of 1. This will allow you to sprint when barely touching the analog. You can also adjust it to the sweet spot, but I would start with it at 1. For crouch behavior, you're going to have it on toggle. For sprint behavior, you're going to have it on tap. For slide behavior, you're going to have it on tap. Sprint interrupts reload as off, and auto sprint as off. Let's begin with how movement speed has a direct correlation with the weapon you are holding. Pistols, SMGs, and LMGs all have different movement speeds, with LMGs being the slowest of all weapons, and pistols having the fastest movement speed. You can also use different attachments which can increase and decrease your movement speed. For example, let's take the AK-47. Testing this with no attachments, with attachments that increase your movement speed, with attachments that decrease your movement speed, and placing them side by side, you can see there is a noticeable difference in the movement speed depending on what attachments you are using. This is also not to be confused with your mobility, which is also something we will be touching on. Movement speed has its own category. Attachments like lightweight barrel, super light front rail, lightweight stock, folded stock, and removed stock all increase your movement speed, while attachments such as the recon barrel, stealth barrel, chrome lined barrel, angled grip, hand stock, lightweight mag, and extended mag will all decrease your movement speed. Depending on the attachment, you can get a 2.5% to a 5% increase or decrease on your movement speed. Like all attachments, they each have their own pros and cons. For example, when I add folded stock to my AK class here, you can see I'm gaining 5% movement speed, but sacrificing 10% min and max spread accuracy. You can set up your loadouts with the sole purpose of having the best movement speed and mobility, but this does come with its own drawbacks. Speaking about mobility, what exactly does mobility do? Mobility affects your jumping distance and speed, as well as your walking and walking ADS speed. Similarly to movement speed, certain attachments will increase and decrease your mobility. Where mobility comes into play the most is during gunfights. On screen, I will show you separate examples of how mobility affects your movement speed. On the left, we will have weapons with decreased mobility attachments, and on the right, we will have weapons with increased mobility attachments. So starting with the walking from side to side, there is a small difference of just under a second. Comparing this to ADS walking to side, there is a much bigger difference of almost 2 seconds. Walking forward, the difference is once again just under a second. So that means the most notable difference comes when ADSing. The extra ground you can cover in a smaller time could be the difference in winning and losing a gunfight. Comparing this with the mobility, when jumping and jumping while ADS, we'll once again see a difference. When jumping from side to side, you can see the difference is apparent straight away. The first clip is with decreased mobility attachments, you can feel how sluggish and heavy it is, while with the correct attachments, you are more lightweight and can jump further. Putting them side by side, you can see the extra distance in which you are able to cover. While ADSing, the results are the same. There is a substantial difference in your mobility with different attachments. This could be the reason why certain players don't enjoy a weapon. It could be down to the attachments that you're using. It's making the weapon feel sluggish and heavy, and making you a easier kill for your opponent, compared to the more lightweight class with faster movement and increased mobility. At the end of this video, I will be showing you a few of my favorite loadouts, so be sure to stick around and try them out for yourself. Let's take a look at the basic movement. Starting with how does a sprint compare to a slide and jump while sprinting? Let's put them side by side so we can see for ourselves. So as you can see, sprinting was the fastest, followed by sliding and with jumping coming in last. But what happens if we pair them together, chaining our sprints with sliding and jumping? It makes almost no difference at all. I did test this multiple times and the results remain the same. Sprinting is just as fast as pairing the three together. So this is conclusive evidence that in a straight line on a flat surface, that is just as fast to sprint as it is to slide and jump. But what happens if the terrain isn't flat? Then how does jumping and sliding affect your movement? movement speed. So we tested sprinting, jumping, sliding, and then all three together to find out which is the best for going up and down the terrain. So we started by going up, and the fastest in this part was a mix of sprinting, jumping, and sliding. This barely took first, but surprisingly the slowest was just a straight sprint. There was almost a full second in the difference. While going down the hill, it was once again the sprinting, jumping, and sliding which was the fastest. This time, surprisingly, being the slowest was actually sliding down the terrain with any added momentum from sprinting or jumping. So if you're approaching a incline or a decline, the best way to do so is by sprinting and then jumping into a slide. And lastly, for your basic techniques is actually one of the best ones to learn in the entire game, and that is going to be the slide cancelling. This is going to allow you to shoot your weapon faster than you normally would when coming from a sprint. What you're going to do to perform this is, when performing a slide, you will jump out of the slide as you ADS, allowing you to instantly pull your gun up, allowing it to be shot. This will only save you a few fractions of a second in a gunfight, but in a gunfight, every millisecond can make a difference in winning or losing a gunfight. Pair this technique with a high mobility, faster shooting weapon, and you will be melting your opponents. Moving into the more intermediate movement techniques, these can be very situational. So let's start with one that you might not be aware is even possible, and that's going to be to sprint sidewards. This is possible on both keyboard, mouse, and controller, but it won't be something you're going to be using every game. Unfortunately, if you're playing on a controller, this can take quite a bit of practice to do consistently, but some of the techniques I will be showing you will benefit you more during gunfights. But this is still an important piece of movement that you can bust out in rare occasions. If you are performing this on controller, you do need to find the sweet spot. You can start by running diagonally, and once you get the hang of it, you will eventually learn where the pressure point is to the side to run in that direction. This next piece of movement will definitely be more effective, especially once you've practiced this. You'll be able to do it at doors, boxes, corners consistently. This is going to be the jiggle peek. You usually perform this when trying to get intel. If you think there is an opponent holding an angle at a corner or a box, instead of running into the open and getting shot, you can jiggle peek, allowing you to see around the corner and reducing the risk of the opponent being able to shoot you. You can perform this by sprinting, jumping, and once you start moving in a direction you're looking to peek, pull back in the opposite direction. This can be done to the left, right, forward, or back. This may take a little bit of time to get used to, but once you've mastered it, you'll be able to do it consistently, and you'll be able to pair this with some of the other techniques as well. Next up is a extremely useful technique in XDefiant, and that is going to be zigzagging. On screen I will show you a few examples of what I mean. While at a full sprint, you can move side to side without losing any momentum. This can be very useful in closing a gap on your opponent. You can also throw in a few slides, and zigzagging further to each side depending on how far away the opponent is. The more movement you do, the harder it will be for your opponent to track you. Next up is if you're trying to outrun an opponent and you're trying to create a gap. Here is a quick and effective way to do it. When sprinting, perform a slide and then jump and sprint again in mid-air. As you're about to land, hit the jump button once again. This will then launch you further, creating a bigger gap. What I sometimes would like to do is, if I'm on low HP and being chased by an enemy, I'll try run through a doorway or around a corner and perform this to get a bit of distance from the opponent. There is a slight cooldown with this though, so if you're trying to perform this across the map and you're doing it multiple times, you will need to perform a sprint in between every second jump. You can also use this when chasing your opponent. If they're trying to escape, you can use this technique to close a gap. So moving on to the more advanced movement techniques. Unfortunately for some of these, you will need to have auto sprint on to perform, at least to perform them consistently. So starting off with bee hopping or bunny hopping, for this you don't need auto sprint on, but it can certainly help. There's two ways in which you can perform this. One is to simply pick up momentum when running. Once you pick up full speed, you can jump, and then each time you're about to hit the ground you jump again. This can last for a maximum of 3 hops before jumper's fatigue sets in. The second way to do this is where you can chain it for over 3 hops, but with this technique you will need auto sprint on. With this technique I've seen people do up to 5 bunny hops in a row without getting jumper's fatigue. I think this is because the game registers it as an input sprint between the slides, which resets the fatigue. Unfortunately with this technique though, it is a lot harder to perform and it's easier to mess up. To perform this you will need to jump, slide and jump twice in between each bunny hop. B-hopping is essential to your play. It can be used to catch opponents off guard as well as win gunfights by popping out when your opponent is least expecting it. Next, let's look at how to maintain your speed and slide without getting stuck into a crouch. For this you will need auto sprint on. This is because if you don't, you will run into an issue. When trying to perform the extra slide, you can lose all momentum and stop in a crouch. To avoid this, turn auto sprint on and you can then perform multiple slides in a row without losing momentum or getting stuck in a crouch. This is a very basic technique and it all comes down to your settings. It is very situational, but if you already play with auto sprint on, then be sure to use this. And lastly is a fun bit of movement I only learned very recently, and that is the mantle jump. This is going to give you a huge speed boost when performed correctly. To do this, you first need to perform a mantle, either on a box, wall, or anything that will give you the mantle animation. Once you see the animation begin, what you're going to do is you're going to jump in any direction and perform a slide mid-air. This is going to give you a huge speed boost and it will catch a lot of opponents off guard. There is endless possibilities with this movement, as it can be performed on any map where you can mantle something, meaning that new spots will continue to be discovered daily. Now let's talk about some movement techniques you should be avoiding, starting with jump spamming. Currently a great way to get kills is by spamming your jump button whenever you're near an enemy. This is great because there is no penalty for doing so, but this is all about to change, as they are introducing a penalty for jump spamming. When you perform multiple jumps in a row, you'll be given a idle sway as well as jumper's fatigue, no longer allowing players to repeatedly spam the jump button whenever they get into trouble. Next is to stop the screen shaking. You may see a lot of clips online of people doing unnecessary camera shakes. This is to try break their opponent's camera. In reality, this isn't a consistent way to improve your movement. From time to time you may get a nice clip doing this, but for the most part this won't help you win a gunfight against any competent player. Also, not to be confused with zigzagging, as zigzagging is actually a movement that can help you win gunfights. And lastly, we touched on it already to start the video, but do not be running around the map with your LMG out. If you're trying to get to a choke point on the map, swap to your pistol at every opportunity, as it will allow you to traverse the map twice as fast. So as far as the loadouts, I'll throw up a few on screen for you now. These so far would be my go-to loadouts. And just an FYI, for anyone looking to get a SMG class, the attachments I use will work on any SMG you decide to use. So it doesn't matter if you're using the P90 or any other SMG, these are the attachments for you. Be sure to give these classes a try and let me know down below which is your favorite. Thank you to everyone who made it this far into the video. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Check out one of the other videos which is up on screen right now, and I'll see you all in the next video.